From 1987 to 1996, children had the joy of watching the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, and were no doubt chanting "Heroes in a Half-Shell, Turtle Power" in the schoolyard. This now iconic show may have been a more light-hearted, slapstick approach to the Ninja Turtle mythology, but back in the day, this show was epic and meant everything to kids all over the world, where each episode will see the mutated, pizza-loving Ninja Turtles leave their home in the sewers of New York to take on the evil Krang and Shredder, as well as their menacing robotic Foot Clan, in order to stop their mischievous attempts to take over the world, where the Turtles would frequently get help from news reporter April O'Neil, their loyal and trusted friend. The show was action-packed, full of jokes and pop cultural references, and it was compulsive viewing to many of us who were growing up at the time, making our childhoods that bit more radical. So today we're returning to the wacky and zany world of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. So let's get ready to kick some shell while eating some pizza as we check it out. Cowabunga, dude! See, I can speak the lingo. Number 10. The Radical Origins of the Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are the creation of comic book artists Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. In the early 80s, the two artists were struggling when they met. They would eventually move into a flat together to work on creating comics in order to get their craft off the ground, where they would try to come up with new and exciting comic book ideas. Feeling deflated and unhappy with things, Eastman drew a picture of a turtle dressed up as a ninja with nunchucks. This picture was just intended to be a joke, to lighten up the grim mood of things. The joke being, it's impossible for turtles to be ninjas, as ninjas have to be super quick and stealthily fast, whereas turtles are notoriously known for being slow. Upon seeing the illustration, Laird added the Teenage Mutant concept. The two comic book artists knew that they may be onto something here, and further explored the concept of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, giving them a backstory heavily influenced by other comic books at the time, particularly Daredevil. In that, like Daredevil, the Turtles get their powers from an accident involving radioactive sludge. And also like Daredevil, who has a sensei called Stick, the Turtles have a sensei called Splinter. And of course, there are the Turtles' names being named after Renaissance artists, including Michelangelo, Donatello, Raphael, and Leonardo. And having them named after Renaissance artists just enjoyably adds to the absurdity of things. Eastman and Laird used the money from a tax refund and a loan from Eastman's uncle to set up a comic book company called Mirage Studios, where in 1984, the very first Ninja Turtles comic was published. Unlike the cartoon series, this original vision of the Ninja Turtles was dark and gritty, as well as violent, with the comic itself being presented in black and white, where the Turtles face off against the evil villain known as the Shredder, who actually dies in the comic book. Yep, he originally was just meant to be a one-off villain. Only 3,000 copies of the first comic were printed, all of which were sold off. There was now a demand for more adventures involving the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, to which Eastman and Laird would make more comic books. And just like that, two struggling comic book guys created a pop cultural icon. Number 9. The Ninja Turtles were pitched as a series of toys which led to the cartoon. So for 2 years, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comics were riding high on success in the comic book market, where licensing agent Mark Friedman saw great potential for the Ninja Turtles to be a big and successful line of action figures. He took the concept of creating Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle toys to a toy company called Playmates, a Hong Kong toy company which at that point had mainly focused on dolls and preschool toys. Although Playmates were hesitant to invest in Ninja Turtles, I mean, you can't really blame them. Back then, the Turtles weren't what they are now. At that time, the Ninja Turtles were just a comic book series, so what's to say that a toy line will catch on with the child market? In order to get complete faith in the Ninja Turtles action figures, Playmates wanted a cartoon series to be released alongside the action figures and other toys. And thus, this is how the cartoon came to be. To sell toys. Well, when you think about it, that's how a lot of franchises start. And so, to see if the cartoon would take off, and thus if the toy line would work, 5 introduction episodes were commissioned. So this new cartoon concept had to be a hit in order for the Playmate toys to take off. Yep, a lot were riding on these 5 introduction episodes. Number 8, the 5-part miniseries. So a 5-part miniseries was produced to act as an introduction to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. The series was produced by Fred Wolf Films, which was founded by award-winning animator Fred Wolf, who won an Academy Award in 1967 for his animated short film, The Box, which was about, yep, you guessed it, a box. Which I guess is kind of fitting, seeing how the Shredder kind of looks like a box cutter. With animation provided by Japanese company Toei Animation, who also animated the very successful Transformers cartoon. And a lot of the animation for the Ninja Turtles cartoon would also be done in Dublin, Ireland. The 5 episodes were broadcast in 1987 and set up the basic premise. 4 Ninja Turtles who live in the sewer with their rat sensei Splinter, where they befriend a news reporter called April O'Neil and learn of the Shredder and Krang, as well as their menacing Technodrome, where the evil villains plan to take over the world. The cartoon was more light-hearted than the comic books, more child-friendly and tongue-in-cheek in order to appeal to the young child market. All of the turtles were also given multicolored headbands to help kids identify which turtle is who, unlike the original comics where they all wore red headbands. The 5-part miniseries was a massive success, and so the toys took off and were also a massive hit. Although I think in some cases it shows that the figures were designed before the animated series, which is why the Shredder and Splinter look so radically different. And a new full series of the Ninja Turtles was immediately put into production, and all involved were handsomely rewarded. And Kevin Eastman even bought an army tank. Yeah, you know you've made it big when you can now cruise around in your own army tank. Number 7. Drastic changes being made to the source material. So as mentioned, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon had to be watered down from its original comic book source material, which would never shy away from showing the Ninja Turtles using their weapons to hack up villains. Also as mentioned, the cartoon was made more tongue-in-cheek, with the Turtles now wearing their signature multicolored headbands. But what about the violence itself? Well, to combat this, the Foot Soldier clan would change from being humans to robots. So when the Turtles use their weapons on them, it's okay, as they aren't real humans that they are hurting. Other changes to the lore include the character April O'Neil, who was originally a lab assistant. It was decided to make her a news reporter, as a way of the Turtles getting access to information. The show was originally aired on CBS, and back then the channel also featured PSAs during child viewing, in order to spread positive messages. So there was an added section called Turtle Tips, in which the Turtles would teach children about being more environmentally aware. The character of Raphael is very radically different from how he was originally portrayed in the comics, in which in the comics he was the most violent and volatile of the Turtles, who would often unleash violent rages, whereas in the cartoon he was more of a laid-back smartass, making him more of a likeable and relatable character. And his ongoing feud with Leonardo was non-existent. Even the ooze which mutates the Turtles was changed. Unlike the source material where it mutates those who comes into contact with it and increases their size and intelligence, in the cartoon the ooze transforms those who come into contact with it as being a hybrid of the last species that they themselves came into contact with. Which, yeah, is a flawed logic, but, you know, after all it is a kid's show. Splinter was also changed. He was no longer a rat that mutated into a super rat, but he was once a human called Hamato Yoshi, who mutates into a rat hybrid from the ooze. Although by that logic, technically he should have been a turtle hybrid, but never mind. Due to the rushed nature of creating the episodes, animation and colour mistakes were often present, particularly in the earlier episodes. For example, it was actually quite common to see the Turtles wearing the wrong coloured headbands. The one thing the Turtles creator Eastman and Laird probably would have wanted to change the most was the design of Krang's humanoid body, as when they were shown the design, they weren't impressed, thinking that Krang looked like the Pillsbury Doughboy if he was sick, and just thought that his overall presentation was dorky. And they even contacted Playmates with their worries. But at that stage it was too late. The 5 introduction episodes were too far into production, so Krang's look was here to stay. It is also said that when Eastman and Laird first went to the recording studio and heard the voice actors, they really weren't impressed and were quite uncomfortable, despite the voice work being adored by child audiences at the time. Which leads me to my next point. Number 6. The radical voice cast. So when it came to the amazing voice talents of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, first up you have the Turtles themselves, with Cam Clark as Leonardo and Rocksteady. Clark also provided voice work for the English dub of the animated Japanese movie Akira, as well as Rob Paulsen as Raphael. Paulsen would go on to voice Pinky from Pinky and the Brain, as well as Stanley Ipkiss and The Mask in the Mask animated series. Barry Gordon voiced Donatello and Bebop, and Townsend Coleman voiced Michelangelo. Coleman also voiced Waldo in the Where's Waldo cartoon and the Tick in the Tick animated series. Renee Jacobs voiced April O'Neil. Jacobs previously did voice work for the My Little Pony cartoon and would go on to provide vocals for Baby Glenn in The Bride of Chucky, which is random. Patrick Fraley provided the voices of Krang, Baxter Stockman and Casey Jones. And Peter Renaday voiced Splinter. The most well-known of the voice actors of that time was no doubt James Avery, who voiced Shredder. During the Ninja Turtles cartoon run, Avery would also star as Philip Banks in the popular sitcom The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Although in later series, other voice actors would provide the voice of Shredder, including Michelangelo voice actor Townsend Coleman and William E. Martin, who incidentally also co-wrote the screenplay for Harry and the Hendersons. Yeah, this voice actor research sure did take me down a rabbit hole. All the voice actors really give life to the characters, as a kid growing up, their voices is what the characters of the Ninja Turtle universe sounded like. According to April actress Renee Jacobs, there was lots of ad-libbing during the voice recordings of the Ninja Turtle episodes, and that the voice actors of the Turtles would often turn up the comical aspect of the show, rather than going for an intended, darker, grittier approach. Supposedly, even Michelangelo's catchphrase of Cowabunga was originally ad-libbed and wasn't a part of the show. She also cited the actors who played the Turtles as being like the Three Stooges or the Marx Brothers, whose comical approaches really gave the Turtles their lovable personalities as seen on the show. Look, I think the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon was to the Turtles what the 1960s Batman TV show was to Batman, in that it was comical and more of a spoof, but that just gave it its charm. And had it gone for a deadpan serious approach, then at that particular time, the Turtles may not have taken off and been the hit that it became. Don't forget, this is the late 80s and early 90s when everything being all dark and gloomy wasn't the in thing. Number 5. Creating a catchy theme song in an hour and a half. A standout aspect of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon is that catchy as heck theme. It sounds so funky and yet so catchy, and had all us kids singing and humming this tune everywhere we went. I would go as far as to say the theme song was a part of the appeal of the TV show, and is definitely a generation-defying theme for those who grew up watching the Ninja Turtles. But where did this theme tune come from? Well, TV show creator and musician Chuck Lorre claims that it was he who came up with the song. Lorre is probably best known these days for creating popular sitcoms like 2.5 Men and The Big Bang Theory. But back in the 80s, he was trying to get script and music writing work anywhere that he could. And when he heard about the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show, he really wanted to create the theme. But at that stage, there was already a musical act working on the Turtles theme, that being a rock band from the 60s called, ironically, The Turtles. But they ended up bailing out on the production. So Lorre was hired, and he was given a budget of $2,000, and went to a music studio in LA at midnight to record, with the recording sessions lasting till 8 AM, as that was the cheapest time to record. And apparently the song heard in the show is actually the demo. The song was written and recorded by Lorre and TV composer Dennis Brown, who was a frequent collaborator with Lorre. But what about the theme's enthusiastic and energetic vocals? Well, they were provided by musician James Mandel, who got a call from Dennis Brown to talk about recording the theme for a TV show without telling him what the show was. He just told him to come into the studio, and when Mandel arrived and saw the lyric Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he thought it was the most bizarre lyric that he had ever seen, and said that it took him up to 20 to 30 minutes to stop laughing at the absurdity of the title Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. but he sung the lines and went for a rock and roll approach, and within an hour and a half, the theme was recorded. Yep, it just took an hour and a half to create a theme song. A theme song that'll stand the test of time and last forever, giving us memorable lines like Heroes in a Half Shell and Turtle Power. Heroes in a half shell, power. Number 4. No violence please, we're British. So in the late 80s and early 90s, the Turtles were huge. If you were a kid at this time, the Ninja Turtles was like our equivalent of Beatlemania. I mean, there was just Ninja Turtles everything. Us kids watched the show religiously and gobbled up all the merchandise eagerly. However, there was one part of the world that wasn't amused, and that was the United Kingdom, as well as other parts of Europe. The censors there particularly had major issues with the title, as it featured the word ninja, and there was fear of the violent connotations that could be connected to the word ninja, especially considering that the Ninja Turtles was a children's cartoon. So the show had to be retitled to Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles. Yep, in the UK and parts of Europe, they scrapped the ninja aspect and replaced it with hero. I can actually remember being a kid in Australia, and my nan in England sent me a Ninja Turtles sweater for Christmas, and I just couldn't figure out why, for the life of me, it had Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles printed on the sweater. It was weird. But the censorship weren't done with the show yet. Nope. There was another aspect of the show that they had problems with, that being the cool party dude himself, Michelangelo. On the account of his nunchucks, there was a fear and panic that children will somehow get their hands on some nunchucks and start attacking people with them. So each episode would have to be re-edited in order to remove Michelangelo's nunchucks. Eventually, the nunchucks would be written out of the US version of the show and replaced by a grappling hook or whatever that thing was. So just to recap, Michelangelo's nunchucks must be banned, but Leonardo's sword, a frickin' sword, was A-OK. Now, to be fair, this was in the tail end of the UK's video nasty meltdown, where certain groups were terrified that movies and TV shows were going to turn children into murderous monsters, and thus there was a lot of censoring, with many movies and TV shows being banned back then. However, since then, the title in the UK has been reverted back to Ninja Turtles. And to give the UK credit, it wasn't only British shores that had issues with the violence seen in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There was plenty of professionals and parents groups who complained about the violence and commercialism of the Ninja Turtles in both the US and here in Australia. Now, this isn't an uncommon phenomenon to happen when something new comes out and the young people like it, with the older generation just not understanding it. Over the decades, it's happened with comic books and rock and roll music, and more recently, video games. I think it creates this paranoia, a paranoia of, I don't understand this new thing, it's leading our kids astray, so therefore it must be banned. But the Turtles stood the test of time and didn't bring about the apocalypse, and the idea of the Ninja Turtles being banned or censored now just seems ridiculous. And in my opinion, a lot of the professionals who went on TV at the time and were talking about how evil and how dangerous the Ninja Turtles are, if you look at them carefully, you kind of got the feeling that they never even watched the show and had no idea what they were talking about and kind of enjoying the 5 minutes of attention. You know, feeling all moralistic and important and superior. But, once again, that's just my opinion. It's probably wrong. Number 3, the never-ending toy lineup. It goes without saying that a huge part of the Turtles' success was the action figure lineup. But oh boy, this was a toy lineup that went a long way. The lineup became notoriously known for just making as many crazy and downright weird variants of the Ninja Turtles as humanly possible. And yet, all us kids were still rushing out to buy them. Hey, as long as it had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the packaging, we were buying it. So the original release of toys featured the Turtles as they are seen in the show. Simple enough, and really, that's all you need. So where do you go from there? Well, they made different versions of these figures, with the Turtles now having special moves, as well as ones that can talk. And it was all down a rabbit hole of insanity from there, as they would release the Turtles in any kind of unlikely and bizarre get-up that they could think of, whether that's dressing them up as sports stars, astronauts, clowns, cowboys, surfers, or punks, you name it, they made a Turtles version of it. Not to mention gimmicks associated with pre-existing toys or franchises, like Transforming Turtles, Troll Turtles, which were terrifying, horror movie Monster Turtles, and, Star Trek Turtles? Sure, why not? We've had every other kind of turtle that you can think of. As a matter of fact, at this point, I'll be surprised if there weren't Star Trek Turtles. I think the weirdest is without a doubt Farming Turtles. Because... yeah, you think crime-fighting, mutated turtles who use the art of ninjutsu to defeat their enemies, and you think farming. Hey, don't get me wrong, this toy is perfect if you want a Ninja Turtle action figure who's going to milk the cows and grow the crops. But for the rest of us, yeah, this didn't really catch on. I think the most disturbing variant was this Mini Turtles in a Turtle edition, where the Turtles can open up into play environments to Mini Turtle toys. And I don't know what it is, but to me this just looks weird and disturbing. Like, as a kid, I don't mind playing with Ninja Turtles, but do I really want to open them up? Ugh! This action figure lineup really exhausted itself. Yep, this beast just went on and on and on and just didn't want to stop. But it then died down when the hype of the TV show died down, and us kids were left with a lot of truly bizarre Ninja Turtle action figures. Number 2, the anime version of the Ninja Turtles. So in 1996, Japan made its own version of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with their own cartoon. The basic look and design of the Turtles is very much based on how they appeared in the original series, but creative liberties were definitely made. The show was called Mutant Turtles Superman Legends, which featured the Turtles finding magical stones, which can transform them into super mutant turtles. It also dealt with other mystical aspects, like ghosts, magic mirrors, a fairy, and the turtles themselves have the ability to combine into a Megazord-like turtle being known as Turtle Saint. However, this strange anomaly in the Ninja Turtles legacy only consisted of 2 25-minute episodes, never to return. And it'll seem that that was the end of this unique chapter of the Ninja Turtles, but the internet had other ideas. This cartoon sounds kind of bonkers and awesome at the same time, and thanks to clips and episodes emerging on the internet, it's become a sought-after curiosity in the Ninja Turtle fandom, where people living outside Japan who didn't know about this cartoon at the time can now indulge their curiosity of discovering this rare and forgotten show. Kind of like a parallel multi-universe version of the Ninja Turtles. Speaking of forgotten shows, there was to be an episode in the original series run called Shredder in Love, but the episode ended up being scrapped. The episode apparently revolved around a love potion, and Shredder actor James Avery even recorded some lines for the intended episode before it was dropped. So somewhere, floating about out there, is a script for a lost and unmade Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode. Will it ever show up? I don't know, it might. Number 1, Cancellation and Legacy. In the series' later days, it was decided to make the show darker and more mature, and to more resemble the original comics and current live-action movies. To go for a less comical approach, and more of a serious one. This is because of the X-Men cartoon, which was a big hit at the time, which tackled darker, daring themes that your average children's cartoon of that time didn't go into. So I guess that this was the show's way of keeping up with the times and being relevant. I can remember they changed the intro and theme song, and this new intro even added in scenes from the movies, for no good reason other than just to remind us of the movies, I guess. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, I didn't like this change, as the original intro felt more iconic. Also at this stage, it felt like the show was trying to be something that it wasn't. Now I know Ninja Turtles was originally a dark story, and there are other turtle variations that go into darker areas, but at the same time the original cartoon series had its own universe, with its own rules and styles. It'll be like if suddenly the 1960s Batman had more blood and grit. You see, it would just feel out of place. But this is all in my opinion, of course. But in all seriousness, at this later stage, I didn't even really watch the show anymore. I grew out of it and now moved on to the Power Rangers. But that said, I do know that there are some people who actually did like this new darker direction, so it's purely subjective. I guess these darker, later seasons act as a gateway between the earlier, campier seasons and the new, darker series that followed in 2003. However, in 1996, after 10 seasons and 193 episodes, CBS cancelled the original Ninja Turtles cartoon, due to new standards and regulations of children's shows, with them needing to contain educational content. And just like that, something that was a worldwide phenomenon that brought many kids so much joy for nearly 10 years was over. Yep, in the blink of an eye, it was no more. Incidentally, for its time, the Ninja Turtles cartoon was the longest running animated series, till The Simpsons would surpass that record. Now that could have been the end of the Ninja Turtles right there and then. It could have just been a crazy fad of that time. But over the years, the Turtles have come back again, and again, and again, and again, to the point where the Turtles are now immortal and will forever be cemented in pop culture. These four heroes in a half shell are here to stay and they aren't going anywhere. It may have started with a gritty comic book, but the true phenomenon of the Ninja Turtles was unleashed on a massive global scale thanks to the cartoon. And for all of those who grew up watching it, it will forever be their fond and loving introduction to the Ninja Turtles, and will forever be a cherished part of their childhoods. Well, what can I say? I mean, yeah, the show was silly and could be childish, but that gave the show its charm and lovability. And I'm glad that I had a childhood that featured the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. Or otherwise, that would have been a sad childhood. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm off to kick some shell. Cowabunga, dude! See, I'm telling you, I can speak the lingo. Anyway, see ya!